present when this fight took place between Morgan and Stevens?
Yes, I was.
And could you tell the court exactly what happened, Mr. Walker?
Well, this was Sunday night, the 14th, the day before the accident. Most of the boys had gone into town, and there were only about 10 of us in the canteen. I was having a drink, and Jack was nearby talking to Morgan. And after a while, they started arguing about politics. And then Morgan began to get personal.
How do you mean personal?
Well, he started taking the mickey about Jack's age, saying he couldn't cope with a young wife, he was past it. Of course, this got Jack annoyed, but he said he didn't have to prove anything to a straddler. And then there was a bit of a...
One minute, Mr. Walker. This word you just used, straddler, did you say?
Yes, sir.
What exactly does that mean?
Well, it's what we call a man who walks a girder with his legs straddled either side of it, sir. You see, the girder's between his legs and his feet are touching the bottom part of it.
Really? I had no idea. And I take it that on this occasion it was used as a term of derision.
Yes, sir. You see, Jack Stevens was a top walker.
A top?
A man who walks along the top of a girder.
I see. So Mr. Stevens was implying that he was superior to Mr. Morgan, who was a straddler.
Yes, sir. Top walking takes a lot more nerve.
I imagine it's much more dangerous, is it?
Indeed it is, sir.
I see. Thank you. Carry on, Mr. Lloyd.
I'm much obliged, my lord. Was it after this that they started to fight?
Yes, Jack threw a punch at Morgan and missed. The table went over. They set to. It didn't last long because me and a few of the others soon stopped it. And then Morgan went off with a couple of his mates and I bought Jack a drink.
Did Mr. Stevens say anything about the fight? Did you discuss it at all?
No, he was feeling pretty fed up. He didn't want to talk at all. In fact, when I asked him if he'd hurt his arm, I was told to mind my own business.
Arm? Which arm was this?
That was the left one. He kept moving the shoulder, rubbing the muscle like he might have sprained it.
You said just now that he'd aimed a punch at Mr. Morgan, a punch that had missed. Now, was this a left or a right-handed punch?
It was a left, straight left.
I see. How did Morgan and Stevens behave towards each other the next morning?
Well, I only saw them from a distance, but they seemed to be working well enough together.
Now, can you tell us what happened when you came off duty on the night of March the 15th from the moment that you left the bridge?
Well, I locked up the store and the safety belt shed, and I went across to the site office. I entered up a few figures on the progress sheet, and then I went across to the canteen.
Was that when Mr. Porton arrived?
Yes, I went across to his car and we talked for a bit.
Mr. Walker, now this is most important. Can you remember exactly what was said?
Yes, he asked me why we hadn't linked up yet, and I told him the reason and that we were going to do it the next day, and he said he hoped it would be all right because had I heard the gale warning. Well, I hadn't heard the radio all that night, so he told me about it.
Did you discuss whether or not anything should be done?
Yes, I said the men had just done a 12-hour shift. It wouldn't be right to send them up again, especially as there was no immediate danger, and he agreed. So we decided we wouldn't do anything unless the wind did blow up again. But if it didn't, we'd get the job done as soon as it was light. Then I said goodnight and went to the canteen.
And Mr. Porton?
Well, I think he went down to the bridge to have a look at it and then got into his car and drove off.
What happened when you got to the canteen?
Well, I must have looked a bit fed up because somebody asked me what was wrong. I told them about the gale warning and what Mr. Porton had said, and that we might have to go up again in the night if the wind blew up again. And then I went across to talk to Jack. I didn't actually hear what Morgan said, but he seemed to be laying the law down a bit, and then he went out.
To speak to Mr. Porton?
Well, I suppose so.
What happened next?
Well, Jack got his boys together, and he said they were going to do the job there and then to save going up again in the night, providing they got double time. Well, I said it wasn't strictly necessary, and I wouldn't let them because I thought they were tired.
Now, please think carefully about this. Did you at any time either ask those men to go back to work or agree to their suggestion?
No. Of course, when I saw I couldn't stop them, I had to go along and get things organised.
Do you know why Morgan went back to work?
Well, he was their charge hand, wasn't he? Anyway, after Jack had a go at him...
Had a go at him?
Yes, he said he was all mouth and trousers. He said the real men were going back to work, even if the little boys were afraid. Well, that was the gist of it. He needed him, so he had to go.
I see. And did you feel that this was an act of bravado for Mr. Morgan's benefit?
Beg your pardon?
Showing off?
Well, I suppose so, certainly as far as Morgan was concerned.
On leaving the canteen, what was the first thing you did, Mr. Walker?
I opened the safety belt shed.
Now, you're quite sure of that?
Yes.
Did you actually see the accident?
No, sir. I was on the opposite side of the river with the other gang at the time.
Mr. Lloyd, Miss Tate, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would like to clarify what now seems to be the main issue in this case. If neither Mr. Walker nor Mr. Porton actually sent the men up onto the bridge, and the men went up in defiance of Mr. Walker's explicit instructions, I really cannot see that the defendants are liable.
Exactly, my lord.
But only if that is indeed the case, my
Yes,
lord.
precisely. The pity is that all these extraneous issues have been entered on the pleadings. It would seem to me a great deal of time and money has been wasted. But let us continue. Go on, please, Mr. Lloyd.
It's been stated that you and Mr. Morgan had a quarrel later that evening. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It was after he came back from the hospital, when Mr. Portland was there. Morgan blamed me for the whole thing. Kept shouting and swearing at both of us, coming out with the usual communist bit about the bosses treading on the workers. And when I pointed out to him that all the boys had gone up that night of their own free will and not one of them had bothered to get a safety belt, he shouted me down and called me a liar. In the end, Mr. Portland told me to take him down the shed and show him it was open.
And?
When he saw I was right, he accused me of opening the shed after the accident.
Had you, Mr. Walker?
No.
Thank you.
How long have you worked for the Porton Construction Company, Mr. Walker?
18 years, miss.
So you obviously have considerable experience. Would you say you're a good site foreman?
No need for false modesty, Mr. Walker.
Well, yeah, I suppose I was pretty good. I did the job well enough.
And what would you say are the prime requirements of a good site foreman?
Well, for a start, he's got to know the trade backwards. Be a good supervisor, able to handle men, and make sure the job goes ahead as planned, I suppose.
I see. Be a good supervisor and be able to handle men. And yet, according to you, on the night of March the 15th, although you felt it wasn't necessary for the men to return to work, they turned round on you and said that that is what they were going to do, against your wishes and against the wishes of the employer. Now, do you honestly expect us to believe that you, a good site foreman, couldn't have dissuaded them?
I tried, miss.
Well, are you sure you didn't ask them to go up?
I'm quite sure. You see, I may not have really put my foot down very hard, but I didn't want to antagonize the men. Small things like that can easily lead to a strike.
And another strike might jeopardize your chance for promotion. Is that what you're saying?
No.
But nevertheless, it is true to say, is it not, that only a month after the accident, you were, in fact, promoted to supplies manager at head office?
Yes, but that had been in the air for months.
So on the 15th of March, you already knew that in the near future you were going to be promoted?
Yes?
The fact that the accident occurred when you were in charge didn't diminish your prospects of promotion?
No. It was an accident. I mean, this sort of thing can happen to anybody in my position.
Have there been many accidents on sites when you've been in charge, Mr. Walker?
A number, miss.
How many? Serious ones, I mean.
5.
How many fatal?
3.
I see, 3 fatal. Now, on the night of the 15th, when you came down from the bridge, did you think, like the other men, that you'd finished work for the day?
Yes.
And that is the reason that you locked the safety belt shed?
Well, it wouldn't be needed again for that day.
No, quite. And you hung the key with the others in your office?
Yes, on the board.
Fine. Now, let me just see if I've got these facts straight. Mr. Porton arrived and asked you if the bridge had been linked up, and you said it hadn't. He asked you if you'd heard the weather forecast, and you said you hadn't. And he told you there'd been a gale warning. Now, is that how it happened?
Yes.
And I believe the next thing you said was that it wouldn't be fair to send the men up again because they'd only just finished a 12-hour shift. Now, why did you say that?
Well, they had.
No. I mean, was Mr. Porton suggesting that the men should go back again?
No.
Then why say it?
I don't know. I just said it, that's all.
Did Mr. Porton tell you what had happened at the meeting he'd had with the road contractors earlier that day?
Only that they were ahead of time and we'd have to get a move on to catch up.
Did you take this as an indirect order to get the men back to work on the link-up immediately?
No. We'd finished talking about all that by then. It was just conversation, really. It might have been one of the reasons why I didn't object too much when the boys said they were going up.
Without any prompting from you?
Yes.
So after the men told you what they were going to do, you followed them out of the canteen?
Yes, I went to open up the safety shed.
Is it possible that they may have got there before you? I mean, were you delayed in any way?
No, I went straight from the shed to the canteen. Sorry, from the canteen to the shed.
You're quite certain of that?
Yes?
And then you unlocked the door?
Yes.
With what?
With a key.
The key that was left hanging in your office when Mr. Porton arrived. Now, if you went straight from the canteen to the shed with the safety belts, you couldn't possibly have had that key with you, could you, Mr. Walker?
Oh, well, I picked it up on the way.
But the office is in the opposite direction, isn't it?
Mr. Walker, are you aware that perjury is a punishable offence? I strongly advise you to answer learned counsel's questions honestly and truthfully. Once you have left the witness box, you will have no opportunity to correct what you have said.
Are we now to understand, Mr. Walker, that the shed was in fact locked and that Jack Stevens could not have obtained a safety belt?
Yeah.
Was this shed frequently locked during working hours?
Yes.
Why?
Well,
We can't hear you, Mr. Walker.
We'd had a number of belts stolen, and Mr. Porton said if they wanted a belt, they could come and ask for one.
And on the night of March the 15th, were you told to get the men back to work?
I wasn't told exactly. You know, it was more of a suggestion.
In what way was it more of a suggestion?
Well, he did say if... Well, I should think of the company first, and then the company might think of me. He didn't mention promotion, but...
By he, of course, you do mean Mr. Porton.
Well, yes.
So did you, in fact, ask the men to go back to work?
Well, not in so many words. I mean, I didn't ask them. It was more of a suggestion.
To which Mr. Morgan strongly objected.
Yes, but I mean, I didn't order him to go up. He took it like that, but I didn't actually say it.
Was it your idea to unlock the safety belt shed after the accident, Mr. Walker?
No, Mr. Porton told me to do it.
Did you realize that you were tampering with evidence?
But it wasn't my fault, really. I mean, I was told to do it. I didn't want to get the company into trouble.
Not to mention yourself. Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Mr. Lloyd, would I be right in assuming that you will be calling Mr. Porton back to the witness box?
With your permission, my lord, yes.
I shall look forward with considerable interest to what he has to say.
My lord, before I recall Mr. Porton, there are some questions I would like to ask Mr. Walker in re-examination.
The case of Stevens versus the Porton Construction Company will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court.